Let's get back to the main. Here's our lovely faces. And ladies and gentlemen, our guest for today is none other than Ray Porter. Hello, Ray.
Huh?
Hello. Happy belated birthday.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We are going to chat with Ray for a little bit, and then we will be going to, Ray is going to read for us. It's going to be great. We're very excited about that.
Well, we hope.
We hope.
Yeah, we definitely are excited about that. I've spent a goodly amount of the day today looking at non-Sigler Ray Porter fans. Like, not necessarily people who don't like Scott, but mostly people who do. And it's so lovely. You know, if you guys don't know this, if you love Ray Porter's work, there's a website, there's a Facebook page called the 50 Shades of Ray. And I hugely suggest that you join it because there's such a delightful community. And
really nice people.
Really nice people. They do great art. Yeah. They do all this fun art. And this is a thing that I actually didn't know until researching this episode, that people make art of you as the characters that they hear you, which they can only hear you do.
Yeah, it's humbling and kind of awe-inspiring. I've always been a very frustrated artist. Like, I wish I could draw, and I just can't. And I see some of the art that people are doing on Twitter for DARKSEID.
For sure.
And I'm like blown away by their ability. You know,
and it's just such a lovely thing. I have never even thought about doing that.
Ladies and gentlemen, move over to our fancy new graphic. Here is Ray Porter up on the big screen, getting ready to read to you. Ray, are you ready to rock?
Yes.
Okay. So guys, once Ray starts, if your volume is too hot, just turn it down on your end. We're gonna keep Ray nice and consistent and lovely
oh my God,
peaks
I'm
in the
so
meter.
excited. I'm so excited.
And here we go. Ray, the stage is yours, sir.
Oh man. Okay. Chapter 13, October 11th. Murray Longworth steered his boat northwest along the forested coast. It was overcast with intermittent drizzle. The chill air somehow slipped through his insulated clothes, feasted on his aching muscles and old bones. Most people would call the day miserable, but not Murray, because the worst day of fishing is better than the best day of work. And since he didn't work anymore, that meant every day on the water was a day stolen from the inevitable death that would eventually drag him down. Every day on the water was pristine, perfect, even the days where he was wet, cold, and shivering. He'd only been on the water for 2 hours, and he'd already landed a redfish, 2 stripers, and 3 croakers. The croakers were his favorite. He heard them in the live well, croaking away with their mournful, frog-like, "please release me" noises. He'd release them all right, in the frying pan. The actual fishing was the best part of his day, but what came next would be almost as satisfying. He'd probably get the boat back home around noon, clean his catch, then fry up the redfish and the croakers for a well-deserved meal that would chase the cold away. Hell, he already had a freezer full of fillets. Maybe he'd call the neighbors over and make it a lunchtime feast. The Johnsons had just moved in. Nice couple. Both retired school teachers. The Browns, Rob and Suzanne, had been coming to Florida for years, traveling from Missouri. Murray wasn't great friends with them by any means, but they were decent enough people. He would enjoy sharing his bounty. His boat wasn't anything special, just an old 16-foot mirror craft he'd picked up for a song, but it was his, and he loved it. Plenty of scuffs and scratches in the paint, plenty of dings in the hull, plenty of crusted-up bits of seaweed clinging to the surfaces. The boat sparkled in places from old fish scales that avoided notice until the sun hit them just so. In a small tray on the console just above the steering wheel and to the right of the fish finder that hadn't worked for a year, Murray's cell phone rang, the vibration rattling plastic against plastic. Probably Rob Brown already sniffing the air, detecting a future fish fry like a hungry Spider-Man detecting danger. Murray answered. "Hello." Hello, sir. Murray Longworth's bladder let go. That happened from time to time. He could read all the literature there was about how it happened to many men. He could listen to doctors telling him there was no shame in it. None of the well-wishing dulled the humiliation, though. And it never would. Murray Longworth, taker of lives, both in person and from a distance. Murray Longworth, former deputy director of the CIA, former director of the DST. Murray Longworth, consultant to not one, not two, but 8 presidents of the United States of America. Murray Longworth, a man who had played an instrumental role in saving the life of everyone on the fucking planet. That was the old Murray. The new version? Murray Longworth, a geriatric wreck who pissed himself often enough that he had to wear a goddamn diaper. If getting old is a bitch, prostate cancer is a strap-on wearing dominatrix who doesn't bother asking for consent before she bends you over and drives it home. Murray had survived cancer surgery, of course, just like he'd survived so many other things in his life. Should he have survived it? Maybe. Maybe not. Pissing one's self was a definite mark in the not column. Age with dignity? Not for him. Sometimes Murray pissed himself because he'd had too much to drink. Sometimes because he was too far from a restroom when the urge hit. Sometimes for no reason at all other than that his body hated him. This time, however, he had a much better reason. The sound of that voice. Ender, Murray said. Jesus Christ. Is this line clean? Of course it was clean. Murray was retired. No one gave a damn what he did anymore. As far as I know, he said. Good. I prefer it if you didn't call me by that name anymore. How about you call me Pat? Pat, Murray said, the single syllable slipping out of its own accord. Pat? No, that wouldn't work. Pat was the kind of guy you got drunk with, gambled with, but who had a tendency to go all in on a pair of 7s, counting on the river card to deliver the goods. Pat got drunk and sometimes passed out on your couch during the Steelers-Ravens game. Pat would watch your dog for a few days while you took a well-deserved trip. In short, Pat was not the kind of guy who had over 50 confirmed kills. How did you get this number? Doesn't matter, O'Doyle said. I got it. What was it, 6 years since Murray had heard that man's deep growl? The past had returned and brought fear along for the ride. Chest-gripping, intestine-pinching fear. Because if this man, Ender or Patrick or O'Doyle or even fucking Pat, if this man wanted Murray dead, then Murray was dead. I'm old, Murray said. I've already had a couple of brushes with the Grim Reaper, even so. I have to know. Are you coming for me? There was a pause. Maybe O'Doyle was considering it. No, he said. A flood of relief. Some days, most days perhaps, Murray Longworth wished for death. He'd lived a long time. He'd done and seen it all. Now his body was failing him, one part after another. People weren't supposed to live this long. Dying wouldn't be so bad. Or so he told himself, before death itself gave him a ring-a-ding on the cell phone. What do you want? A favor, O'Doyle said. What kind of favor? Ever see the movie Blues Brothers? Such a strange question. Part of a normal conversation, almost. The kind of conversation you might have with Pat over a couple of beers in a corner bar. This wasn't normal, though. This was about as far from normal as one can get. Sure, Murray said. I've seen it. Why? Because I'm putting the band back together. I need you to find the other players for me. Other players? The guy had been fired from the Department of Special Threats. He'd been a pariah there. No one had liked him. What the fuck do you want with the DST, Pat? I don't work there anymore, and you certainly aren't welcome back. I'm not talking about the DST. Then what did he... A flood of faces that Murray had spent 20 years trying to block out. Sleepy, Landslide, Skylark, Curveball, Hatchet, Knuckles, Swampy, Bookworm, Mullet, Elgato, and, of course, Ender. I'm retired, Murray said. Have been for 3 years. I can't find those people anymore. Of course you can. Listen to me. I am out. What part of retired do you not get? They gave me a gold watch and a slap on the ass, not a security clearance to be named later. You're so full of shit I can smell you from miles away. O'Doyle said, You got old. You didn't mutate. You're the same guy I knew way back when. I'm calling in a favor from you. That means you call in favors from someone else. You still have connections. Use them. A pause. You used us, right? Murray closed his eyes as if they might stem the tide of heat rising to his face. I did, he said. I absolutely did. You will do this for me. This wasn't a favor. It was an order. Murray would obey just as O'Doyle had always obeyed. It was the least Murray could do. I'll get right on it. What O'Doyle wanted was no simple request. His team members didn't exist. Their pasts had been erased. It was like they'd never existed. That was the prerequisite for joining a squad that did very illegal shit. A squad of assassins that killed Uncle Sam's enemies, or sometimes a potential enemy of Uncle Sam, or sometimes the enemies of Uncle Sam's pals. Back then, Murray had believed in the job, in the cause. Now, maybe not so much. How many deaths had he ordered? Because of him, how many men and women never got the chance to retire, to buy an old fishing boat and shiver in the misty cold of dawn, watching the sun rise day after day? Murray. Yeah, I'm here. I'll get you what you want. This will square us. Then a sound even more frightening than the voice of Patrick Ender O'Doyle. His laugh. Not even close, old man. Not even in the ballpark of square. That shit wasn't my fault, Murray said, anger lacing his words. Anger at the past, anger at the present, anger at a life that seemed more and more empty every morning, that death had the fucking utter lack of courtesy to come a courting. Maybe, O'Doyle said. Maybe the powers that be took the decision completely out of your hands. They didn't, Murray, old sport, and you know they didn't. You could have done something, but you wanted to be done with it all. You wanted O'Doyle and his team of psychos to just go away. That's not why you owe me, O'Doyle said. That's not why you owe us. Even if you had nothing to do with it, you could have checked up on us. We went to the wall for you. Many times we got thrown to the wolves. You got to be the deputy director of the CIA. You could have kept in touch. You could have seen if your people were okay. You didn't. We weren't. I wasn't. Pissing oneself was humiliating. Thinking about what Murray had done, or hadn't done, was worse. Far worse. O'Doyle and his team, the no-see-ums they called themselves, had once worked for Murray. He'd sent them all over the world, covert missions to dozens of countries. Full deniability if they died because the men and women that made up the no-see-ums had no records of any kind, no ties to America. Murray had made those histories vanish. Poof, a cloud of smoke, your past life is gone. Maybe that couldn't be done nowadays, what with the digitization. Maybe that couldn't be done nowadays, what with the digitization of every fucking thing there was, but back then it was possible. The no-see-ums had worked for him. They had killed at his command. They had died at his command, too. Murray had run a department that did not exist. The no-see-ums were that department's primary operating unit. Things started out fine. Kill a dictator here, eliminate a war criminal there. But the team had been too good at their job. Within a year, Murray was getting can't-be-denied requests from other departments. A monster had been born, and everyone and their cousin wanted to use that monster for their purposes. Then, Banda happened. Bureaucracy tends to move at an agonizing, glacial pace. When the shit hits the fan, though, and things need to be quickly and efficiently swept under the rug, bureaucracy can put the proverbial pedal to the metal. The department that did not exist was shut down. Those that did have power, like Murray, pulled strings, made arrangements, cut deals. Murray found himself in a new position with the Department of Special Threats. Those that had no real power, like O'Doyle and his squad mates, were quietly left with a choice. Keep your mouth shut, or someone would shut it for you. Permanently. After Banda, when things had been shut down, Murray had been glad to wash his hands of it all. Shit happened, right? He'd done good work for the country, right? He'd earned a better position, right? He'd moved on. He hadn't looked back, and therein lay his shame. Murray had continued his climb up the CIA's promotion ladder, eventually becoming deputy director. He'd even had a shot at the top spot in the CIA, but that hadn't happened. He'd been offered a far more challenging role instead, director of the Department of Special Threats. He'd taken that position, and after a few years, he'd hired Patrick O'Doyle. Other than O'Doyle, Murray hadn't checked in on the other no-see-ums. He hadn't reached out to see if they needed help. He wasn't supposed to contact them, of course. His orders were to leave them be. He wasn't supposed to. But he should have. His people. He'd left them behind. For good. For the simple reason that they scared the living fuck out of him. Assassins, each of them with multiple unofficial kills to their name. The most frightening of them all, their boots-on-the-ground leader, Patrick Ender O'Doyle. "I'll do my best," Murray said. "I really will." "Good. And do it fast." I'll call you at this number in 24 hours. You will answer, won't you? For the second time in mere minutes, Murray Longworth's bladder let go. Not as much piss this time, of course, but enough to bring embarrassment. I will, he said. I will. Good. Talk to you then. Patrick O'Doyle hung up. Murray had pissed himself the second time because his brain, experienced in the ways of the no-see-ums, had instantly put some pieces together. Their pasts were erased. His was not. O'Doyle had called Murray's personal phone, which meant it would be child's play for the big man to find out where he lived. So, if Murray didn't do what he'd been asked to do, he pushed the thought away. A touch less than 24 hours to go. Time to make some calls of his own. Murray pushed the throttle forward and the fishing boat shot across the water, headed for the docks.
All right.
Oh my goodness, that was great.
I've worked on this book literally for years and years and years, and that's the first chance I've had someone else read it. One of the best experiences of my writing career right there.
I have to tell you, Ray, I purposefully didn't, Scott hasn't heard any of the narration.
Oh, wow.
I have.
Wow.
You know, I've worked with Andrew and as you guys have, right? He has not heard any, specifically for this hopeful reason that you would come on and do that. And he was quite verklempt. It was very lovely.
I'm really happy. Thank you.
Oh, that was so lovely. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Ray. That was crushing. That was so good. Because, you know, like, I think this is, you know, pat myself on my own back. This is the best thing I've done yet, character-wise.
It's so full. It's so rich. It was such a pleasure to read it and to narrate it and to act it. You know, there's so much depth to all of the relationships in the book. It's really a rewarding read. And basically what you just watched is how I narrate, including that glitch in the middle. This is what it is.
You had one flub in the whole thing. That was amazing.
Well,
yeah. You saw such a pro. It's ridiculous.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
And you just are like... going again.
You can't see the chat room, Ray, but the crew is raving about it. So I think
I'm glad.
People are delighted to see Murray again and hear your the portrayal of Patrick is pretty killer. But I'll say that, and we'll move on to some other stuff that was awesome.